Hello and welcome. Today we are going to talk about the fourth limb of yoga. In the fourth limb, we harness the force of life itself through the power of the breath. This is an important topic, and to better understand it, let's give it some context. As we said before, yoga is harnessing, and we are talking about 8 subdivisions of the harnessing process, and what we are harnessing is human potential. These are practices organized into 8 sections of cultivation. They are based on the allegory of the chariot. That's why we use the word yoga, because it means to yoke, and to yoke the chariot to the horses, and to ride the chariot wherever we need to ride it. Now, the horses represent the life force that we're going to talk about today. The chassis of the chariot represents the body. The driver of the chariot is the mind. He's the one, or she is the one that controls the horses. And the owner of the chariot, usually portrayed as a warrior, is the soul or the individual essence. You might even say that they are a twin, or there's two of them. There's the soul and the spirit. However, the body and the soul are both infused with the consciousness, the essence of consciousness, which is the spirit. All of these are a synthesis and or fusion of, in Indian tradition, known as the spirit and Shakti poles of existence. The spirit is consciousness, it is the subjective, the person, the essence that looks out of our eyes that knows we are aware, and the Shakti is all the rest. It is the objective pole of existence, the substance, anything we experience, whatever consciousness experience, and the word Shakti means force. These are the 8 subdivisions. The first is known as the 5 cultivations of integrity. The second are the 5 foundations of internalization. The third is the optimization of stance, and I'm using kind of loose paraphrase here. The 5 cultivations are 5 behavioral modifications we make consciously. The 5 foundations of internalization are the first real practices that we do in order to turn within and prime our awareness for the deeper layers of practice. Once we are able to internalize, we can move into the optimization of our stance, which includes physical and mental posture and attitude. Now we come into the cultivation of vital breath. We begin with the breathing process and move into the sensation of energy. This is another application of internalization. The third application of internalization is sense inversion, where we tune into the consciousness behind the senses, and each sense has its specific type of consciousness. We filter out the external stimuli, we ignore that, and we just tune into what the stimulation of awareness is through the senses. From then on, once we do that and we can integrate those 3 stages, we move into awareness localization. This is the first of another 3 stages, which represent the actual transmutation of consciousness. So awareness localization is followed by the focus of consciousness known as meditation, where the transmutation process occurs, because there our localization is on consciousness itself, using the vital breath, the foundation of sense inversion, and the optimization of our stance. As we move through that, we reach a point where we abide in a certain type of consciousness that fuses all of the previous, known as fusion consciousness or fusion awareness. This in Sanskrit is known as samadhi, and it is the proverbial culmination of the harnessing process. At the same time, it is the first step into what we can do with the harnessing process, because as we enter this stage, it is a cumulative progression in itself. As we enter this stage, we are able to apply it in manifesting, first of all, and second, it in itself acts as a dissolving agent. It acts as a dissolving agent to dissolve our attachments in terms of programming and conditioning. So it purifies the mind, and it purifies the awareness, and it purifies the connection of the mind to the body and the energy and everything else that's involved in these subdivisions. It helps to organize the subdivisions into categories. There's more than one way of doing this. Here is mine. The first category is that of preparation, and this involves the externalized disciplines or focuses where we modify our own behavior by simply choosing to do so. We believe in these 5 principles, like telling the truth, not stealing, not being presumptuous, and jumping to conclusions, which can lead to violence or violation behavior, etc. Once we can move enough that we have absorbed these, we can actually move to the foundation, because the essence of the foundation practices, the internalization itself, first is internal hygiene. And the behavioral modifications help to clean the room. They help to clean the mind and keep things in order, so to speak, so we can move forward into a sense of contentment in the moment, where our obsessions have taken a back seat. The noise that is based on false premises of false approaches to life or distorted approaches to life takes a back seat. And so internalization becomes not just easier, it becomes doable. And as we move through internalization, which we've discussed in the previous installments, we hit upon the very foundations of internal cultivation. Our internal passion is one. Second is the internalization itself, where we engage in an active mindfulness of our deepest aspiration for doing this kind of thing. And this connects us to our deeper self, our higher self, that provides a window where we can surrender to something even beyond that, to the transcendent. All we need to do is know there is a transcendent, that this is connected to the heart and to the deepest part of us. And the window to the transcendent is our own deeper aspirational dynamic. And it doesn't happen automatically, but this is where religion comes in. Religion provides a certain ideal for the transcendent and helps it to link to the aspirational dynamic of an individual. However, when you practice yoga, you do not need religion. It isn't a mechanical dynamic, but you don't need a formalized dogma. What you do need is your own awareness and your own conviction and your own aspirations toward that conviction. So now, once we do these foundation practices, which are very, very important in my honest opinion, if you set that foundation, everything else is an application. So the next 3 limbs or subdivisions are applications. It's application on the body and the mindset, the stance, application on the breath and the life force, the subtle sense or energy, and application on the psychophysical foundation of consciousness, which is the senses. You can stop thought, you can take out the mind, you can take out all of that, but if your senses are operative, you are connected to the world, and the world is stimulating consciousness. And we want to tune into that root of consciousness because it is the purest root. Our thoughts are not pure, they're conditioned. Even our feelings are conditioned by the thoughts. So consciousness like that is kind of tainted. So what it does is it says, look at what nature gave you. Your eyes, your ears, your nose, your taste, your feeling sense, your tactile sense. All of these senses stimulate consciousness directly through coherent pathways. So if they can be internalized, meaning that, well, you can filter out what the form of the sense is and get into what the biological response of the sense is, then you access the purity of consciousness, and you can have a place to stand that you can build upon without having everything crumbling because it's tainted by falsehood and conditioning. See, we're building foundations upon foundations. It's almost like a pagoda. You have a broad lowest base, and then you build another thing on top of that, and then on top of that another one. So it's almost like a step pyramid. Now then we go into the consciousness cultivation. It's the cultivation of deconditioned consciousness. And that means focusing on the essence of your awareness itself, whose foundation is set by the previous. First, you're able to localize it and sustain that. This isn't just mindfulness. This is the focus of sustaining attention. Then you move into self-reflection proper, which is meditation, where it's like looking at your consciousness in the mirror and identifying it. It's a kind of observer awareness, only you're not passively observing. You're not standing back and disconnecting. You are involved in it. So you get to experience, through localizing your consciousness on that, what the essence of consciousness truly is. The previous stuff with Ishvara, with your higher self, with your passion, your flame, your inner flame, all of these were the fundamentals that you were able to grasp in order to prime the body, mind, and the life force and the sense organs, in order to grasp the essence of consciousness and experience your true self reflection. That is a process that's ongoing and moves into what we may call fusion consciousness or samadhi. It integrates everything else, and the characteristic of samadhi is that the subject, the object, and the act of experience or perception, they all become a continuum. You don't differentiate between them, and all of them move into the dynamic that is what consciousness is in relation to whatever it perceives, thinks, or does. Let's continue. Let's now talk directly about the fourth limb. There are three issues I want to mention, or three subtopics here, before we get into what the sutras tell us. The first is, in order to understand this fourth limb, we need to get an understanding of what respiration is and how it leads from the breath to the life force. Second, we need to understand that this life force is what animates everything. It drives all our chemical processes. It drives all our mobility. It makes our muscles move. It makes our nerves work. It has a very, very special place in esoteric understanding because this life force constitutes the subtle body of the human being. And that there's a whole aspect of mystical, magical, esoteric understanding that relates to the subtle body. Case in point, alchemy itself has to do with the transformation of the subtle body. And the subtle body it ranges from what's called the astral body, which is a more mentalized form, down to the etheric body. And I'm just using theosophical nomenclature here. But the etheric body, which is the denser part. The subtle body has physical roots, and the breath is what connects us to those physical roots. This is what the physiology of the breath is about. We breathe, it goes through our lungs, into the bloodstream, and into every cell in the body where combustion occurs. Combustion creates certain chemicals that are then like springs coiled. Whenever they reach another point in the body that needs them, these springs uncoil with force and release that force, and this force powers the body's processes. It's the gist of it. What it doesn't tell us is what the nature of the energy is. So without getting into the chemistry and the biology of it, the nature of the energy is two things: electrical, luminous. So we have light and we have electricity. And I don't mean electric current, I mean charge. Electric fields. Directed electric fields are what power chemical processes. Chemical processes involve electron transfer. This electrical energy interacts at deeper levels with consciousness to create more subtle layers that are not detectable through instrumentation, but they can be sensed, and that's what we care about. There is a vital current that's connected to our attention, that connects our neurological activity to this generation of breath force, and when we move our attention in the body, we can train ourselves to detect these currents and even generate. This is what animates the body. It's what animates consciousness. It is the bridge between matter and spirit, this energy. And it is physically electrical or electromagnetic because light comes into play. Electrons and light are very tightly connected. So light and electricity at the physical level. And then we come to the entanglements with consciousness, which is intertwined with all of this. And no scientist knows how it is intertwined. A mystic can sense how it is intertwined, however, because they know that they can sense life force and they can move it around. So the connection from mind to life is intimate with electricity, electromagnetism. The identity of this energy is when consciousness comes in. And the awakening of light is the awakening of life force. The awakening of life force is when light and consciousness come together. This is why somebody who's mystically inclined, at least metaphorically speaking, is associated with luminosity. All of this has to do with a subtle body. And when I say body, I don't mean a form that's substantial and structured. I mean the awareness of a frame that is made of life force. The totality of the awareness of the life force of the body constitutes its own subtle body, just like the totality of the awareness of your thoughts and feelings create what some people call a mental body, which is more rarefied. So these bodies are like layers of an onion, and the densest layer is the physical body. I'm saying this again to give a context for the sutra verses that we're going to describe. So let's get to those. So let's get to it. There are 5 verses. Verse 49, my translation. Out of this third limb, vital force mastery is established as the sectioning of the act of respiration. Okay, so we're looking at our respiration and we're saying, okay, there's different parts of it. What are these parts? That's the next verse. The refined extension of energy is an observation practice performed by means of reckoning the when and where of the cyclic pattern of outflow, inflow, and stillness. Now, outflow is the exhale, inflow is the inhale, and stillness is whatever happens between them when the breath turns around. You're observing a process that generates this energy, this sensation. So you're moving your awareness into something that's very subtle, and you're sensitizing yourself. Okay, so this is a refined perception of sensitization. You're sensitizing your perception by observing the breath. Very simple. However, in this observation practice, if you focus on the stillness, you may notice that a fourth phase effortlessly bypasses the inflow outflow condition. Now, some people translate this as meaning you stop breathing. You concentrate on the stillness, and that's where stuff happens, so to speak. You stop breathing because that's where the energy is, and you don't need to breathe anymore, or your just body doesn't, you forgets how to breathe. And that's all true. You can focus so much that you find your breath becomes slower. You breathe slower, so your inhale is slower, your exhale is slower. The stillness in between is prolonged. So when you experience this stillness, you become more and more sensitive to what's going on in the stillness, which is the sensation of life force. This is when the oxygen going into your blood reaches the cells and the chemical reactions occur, and your nervous system perceives what's going on. It's a purely physiological process. However, the physiology shifts into psychosomatic sensing as you move into the perception of the stillness. What that means is that you don't need to focus on the inhale and the exhale anymore. You can just breathe normally because you are now focused. Each time that there's energy combusting in you, you can feel it. You've tuned yourself to the pattern of these sensations. So consequently, this fourth phase is when you're independent of the breathing process, when you go, okay, my awareness now has tuned into the energy. I'm simply perceiving the energy. And that's when the psychophysiology of it kind of reaches a more subtle level. This is a more internalized dynamic now, and that's what we want. This fourth dynamic is found in the dissolution of that which conceals our inner radiance. In other words, your programming dissolves. Remember what we said about light being connected to life force. And light is a kind of interface between this subtle nature and pure consciousness. Light is not pure consciousness. Pure consciousness radiates through light. Inner radiance is where consciousness moves into energy naturally. And inhibiting that process are a whole bunch of patterns, and alchemy is the process of dissolving them. So then your natural dynamics, and I like to use that word because it covers a lot of territory, your natural dynamics take over. So consequently, this stillness is where the energy itself, like a standing wave, proliferates and it dissolves everything that inhibits your natural evolution. In addition, and the last verse here is supplementary, you know that you're reaching this state when the spirit of sustained attention is natural. So if you can sustain your attention in this sense of stillness where the energy, it's not a stillness of nothingness, the energy doesn't stop. You might say physiologically it's the balance point between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system processes. When this energy moves through certain channels, it creates profound effects. So let's summarize everything we've said about this. The sectioning of the process of respiration is an act of life force or vital energy. Breath is the stimulus of life force. Breath is not life force itself. The inflow, outflow, and stillness between the inflow and the outflow are only nominally about what the breath does. To succeed in vital force cultivation, we need to make it about the energy, which translates into sensations stimulated by the breath. All in all, we are working with the kinetic energy of the inflow, and you can still feel energy as you breathe in. And then the kinetic energy of the outflow. Again, you can feel it. Then you have the part that we need to focus on, which is the immobile potential energy between the inflow and the outflow. So if you just focus on breathing in and then breathing out, you will feel energy, but it's going to be more difficult to link that energy with your awareness and perceive the awareness and the energy as functions of each other almost, to perceive them as intertwined, to perceive them as working together. You are mastering life force when consciousness and energy become one. And that's when you open to this fourth state that can dissolve all of your programming and everything you need to dissolve in order to reach the primordial natural state. And this is the natural state you're approaching from here on in. The limbs that follow the fourth limb are moving into a grasping of this fourth state. This isn't something we wake up to automatically, but as we move toward it, we work with our senses and internalize them through the immobile aspect, through this fourth state. We are weaving this energy into our senses, and we're realizing in the fifth limb how our senses become this energy. Each of our senses is portioned again with a particular expression of this maximum potential energy. We are weaving our consciousness by observation and identification with it. So the weaving of consciousness occurs from this point on. Right now, we want to tune into it. And this weaving is the potency that we're after. This weaving eventually will reach to the state of samadhi, which is where the transcendent and the individual become one, and where we can actually make things happen, and where the ecstasy comes in. All of these things work with the weaving of energy and consciousness. So we're at a pivot point. And if anyone can understand this, then anything that happens afterwards is more likely to be a very smooth process without any hiccups. I have a few more things to say about this fourth phase. Number one, it bypasses the previous three phases. It is independent of physical respiration. We've mentioned that. Let's emphasize it. Once you hit the fourth phase, you are doing real energy work. Two, its advent and execution are effortless. So as you progress and you find that your attention can effortlessly focus on it without being forced. It is a spontaneous outcome of internalization alchemy and everything you've practiced before. So the vital force essentially speaks for itself at that point. Because it's natural, it is a function of identity with Ishvara. The very foundation we set with internalization opens us up to the transcendence and our receptivity to the transcendent. And it operates as the nervous system releases its deep-seated programs that inhibit this connection to Ishvara. When we surrender to Ishvara, we're not capitulating, of course, but the experience may be very, very subtle. Right now, we're accessing the body mind in order to maximize this experience and nourish it and cultivate it. That's why it's called cultivation. So I mentioned that the energy we're after in the fourth state is potential energy. Technically, it is potential energy, but as you move into the weaving of consciousness with energy, you will realize that it kind of goes beyond notions of kinetic and potential. It is vibrant, it's alive, and at the same time, completely still. So the stillness is one of non-motion, but energized non-motion. In that sense, it's potential. However, it is the vitality of this energy, because a car at the top of a hill with maximum potential energy is not moving at all. A car that speeds down a hill has maximum kinetic energy, and that's all it's doing. It's moving. Here we have both. In terms of the breath, you're hitting the point. The access point is that with maximum potential, meaning that things flow with the in-breath, and then there's a stop, a turnaround. That's the potential. Then the outflow again. That's kinetic, and then it reaches again, potential. But that is the entrance point. As you continue to observe it, not just observe passively, but apply the internalization process as described before, with the optimal stance, with the optimal posture for the body to ease all of the gravity situations on it, and with the optimal attitude of the mind to relax its own resistance. Whatever happens, this is energy into a standing wave. And the more you weave your identity into it, the more it comes alive in its own way, vibrant yet immobile and sustained without effort. Now let us talk about the progression of this cultivation. So the energy of the fourth phase is the carrier and support for the transformation of consciousness. That's why we have the fourth phase right in the middle. In fact, this phase, the fourth, and the next one, the fifth one, with energy, with sense internalization, that is the midpoint. As you reach the culmination of the fourth phase, when you've progressed enough to tune into energy and move into the fifth phase, which we will describe next time, you are at the pivot point of the whole eight limb process. You remember we split it into certain parts and said that, well, it depends. You can group them together in various ways. The simplest grouping is part one, part two. Part one ends in the fourth phase where you've laid the foundation of energy work, and now you're ready to weave it into consciousness, starting from the most primordial and physiological consciousness we have, which is the consciousness of the five senses. So this is a vital energy at this point. They call it prana shakti in Sanskrit. And it's essentially the vital force, literally. And it stimulates the spinal meridian or middle pillar to amplify as the transformation force known as Kundalini, eventually. The fourth phase is advanced. It's advanced with respect to everything else. So if you're just doing mechanical processes and let's focus on the breath, then you're still moving toward it. Slowly, quickly, whatever, you're moving toward it. But as you hit the point where energy, you're still breathing, but the energy is sustained like a standing wave, so you can now penetrate it with your awareness. Its actualization overlaps the practices of the next four limbs. They complement it, just as it stimulates their actualization in terms as it evolves in this, because everything that we've been doing is ongoing. Every limb that we've accessed and we've stimulated and we've moved to actualize keeps going even as we move to the next limb. You simply build up to the samadhi phase, and the samadhi phase can be a split second and then it goes away. People spend years trying to prolong this thing, even if they ever attain anything. They may be stuck in mechanical processes and not even know they're blocked. This is one of the reasons why I'm expressing all of this stuff in this manner. This is a boiled down, simplified way, even though I'm elaborating on it, of the basics that often get glossed over. So, in the final application, the aspirate transforms their very sensory awareness as the foundation of new consciousness. And this is what's going to happen in the next stage, which is very important. So, please stay tuned. And finally, at the end, I'd like to say thank you for watching. I hope you like the new format with these slides. If you like the material, please give us a thumbs up. If you're interested in more, you can subscribe by clicking on the Magus logo at the lower right-hand corner. So I always welcome comments, but please tune in next time. Things will get deeper from here. We are describing the mystical aspects now, even though they started with the internalization dynamics. So all of these things are subtleties and take time if you are interested in practicing. You can tune into my Substack at acgeorge.substack.com, which gives fundamentals of occultism, but I am seriously thinking of going a little more advanced, formulating frontier level knowledge, which can be controversial, including the role of AI in consciousness in our lives. So thank you for listening. Without further ado, Megas out.